Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to do My Hero Academia chapter 283, my thoughts, my impressions, my analysis, the little details I've been able to find. And yeah, hope you guys are all having a great day because this was a pretty fun chapter, really exciting, super excited. I remember looking at the spoilers, super exciting chapter. For this chapter, I think there's actually a lot of really cool things to talk about. There is one really cool idea, and there's something really interesting in how the author kind of puts that idea into the page. So it's really nice. There's a nice self-contained story, and yeah. So what I want to say is that first, I want to begin by talking about lights. Nah, man. Nah, I'm joking. I'm joking. Nah, it's not that. The thing that I want to begin by talking about is specifically Mineta's questions that we get in page 6 on Viz. So this is gonna be the first part of the conversation, and then we're gonna move into a general what's gonna happen next, because this is just such an interesting situation when you see Higanto doing what he's doing. But yeah, we'll talk about Mineta's question first, then the Higanto situation and where we're going, what I'm thinking right now, and then we'll go into page by page walkthrough. So with Mineta's question, now what I want to say, the setup for Mineta's to begin questioning things here, in some ways, Mineta being the one to question it, and of course the birds are in the background. Uh, Mineta being the one to question it for some reason feels appropriate. It's really funny that in the same page that you have a hero telling the kids to not doubt their decisions and their actions. You have Mineta just questioning it immediately. It's that's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. Of all people too, it's a pretty funny situation. Mineta's not, I think, one of the most mentally strong characters. But let's go into it. So Mineta asked the questions: did we do the right thing really? And the heroes too, did they make the right choices? And of course, the author superimposed that over a shot of Hawks. So what that question is ultimately there to do is it makes you just the author's directing your thoughts into one particular direction. He wants you to also think about, did Hawks make a good decision? And the Hawk situation, we already talked about it in length in previous chapters. It's a nuanced situation. It's the actions that Hawks ultimately took were not idealistic actions. I think we can all agree with that. They were pragmatic actions. They were the actions of someone that is not all powerful. So, let's start evaluating Mineta's question here. Let's start evaluating Hawks. Let's go down the chain of command, or the chain of causation here. The heroes too, did they make the right choices? Okay. First, I think we can all agree that the worst choice that these people made was assuming that Higanto was going to be kept in check because no one was going to act on it. That is a fundamentally terrible choice. When they made that choice, it was over, right? That was a stupid choice. That's on the Hero Commission. That's on whoever was the brains of this operation. Bad choice. Going into Hawks, killing twice. Was that a good choice? Let's reframe that. The main goal with twice was remove twice from the villains. That was the overarching goal, and how they went about it was killing twice when it came to Hawks. So, was removing twice from the villains a good choice? Was that a good idea? From Hawk's perspective and from our perspective, you could probably argue for it. Now, we're not sure if Twice could have made Nomu. He never made Nomu when he had the opportunity to. We're not sure if he could have made the Nomu. But, even creating post-villain fight Shigaraki, that could be potentially dangerous. It depends on how desperate the situation got. Making a copy of Redestro 2 could be a very dangerous situation. The idea of wanting to remove Twice from the situation only helps in the future. That's only a good option. It's unfortunate we had to go down the route of killing, and that is a part that we can legitimately criticize. But again, it's such a compromised situation that at the end of the day, I'm not going to fault Hawks for not being able to bring a mentally unstable person on the side. So in regards to that, that's that choice. Let's go back a little bit further, because this is really where Mineta's going, because he ends off his question with this whole nightmare, didn't we just make it all worse? So this is him putting in that layer of fear here, right? So going back now, was it wrong for Hawks to infiltrate the villains? I don't think so. Was it wrong for Hawks to feed information to the heroes and preempt the villains? I don't think so. Now, mind you, If they don't preempt the villains, these cities are still going to be standing at this moment in time. Here's the thing. If Shigaraki got the full time that he needed, would this situation or an equivalent of this situation occur? You know, because if we're saying that the problem is right now we made this all worse by going in early, then at what point do you start kicking the can down the road, right? This is like the real where the big issue is. When you look at the page that Mineta is on, he's showing the damage. The author shows the damage to like give more credence to Mineta's point. But there's also something else that you see in those pages. There's people, two of them being significant designs, running after Gigantomachia. They're among that destruction. They're following behind him, and they're excited. So, if you were going to say like, oh yeah, no. If we gave the villains time, maybe they would have realized that this is not what they want to do. When you see this here, they're chasing after Giganto. The Liberation Front are people who were happy to go up against the League of Villains, and they had many of their members wiped out. But yet, these are people who were so zealous that they continued to work with the League of Villains once the League of Villains were announced their leaders. Those guys were still in there. Like, that was a level of zealotry that you were not going to see anywhere else. Even here where you have Giganto's running through this building, through the city, and you have Dobby there. Dobby's laughing. Dobby's having a great time. There's no reason to believe that letting the villains do things on their own time would have prevented destruction, especially not when you know that these guys were going to be bombing major cities. When it comes to Mineta's question, I don't think they made it worse. I think that this is just shows how nasty of a situation, and whatever I see happening in front of me with with the Mineta side of things, I just keep thinking to myself, this could have been a lot worse. Like this, I mean, this is already pretty bad, but this would have been a lot worse had Hawks not gone in. Now, what's really interesting is the story that the author tells with this, because really, when you look at the Shigaraki side and the Gigantomachia side, these are really contrasting situations, because on the Gigantomachia side, the actions that the heroes are taking, you don't necessarily see the immediate benefit of those actions. Like, you may not see the immediate benefit of those actions until very later on, like maybe when Giganto falls over because he's tired and he falls over at the critical moment. You're not going to see the benefit. But when you look over at Shigaraki's side, can you say the same thing? Can you say that the little actions didn't matter? Now, that's where the interesting thing lies, because the author answers that. In this chapter, we have that moment where Shigaraki is just like, what's today's date? And what's the next thing that we see on the other page? We have a very interesting flashback. We see the flashback of Mirko destroying Shigaraki. And I just want to say, in the composition of this flashback, we don't usually see a flashback where there's one panel fading into another. A very irregular flashback style for Shonen Jump series. So it was really interesting to see here, but the author had to do this because I don't know if you recall, but the percentage panels were fairly far away from the action. So you wouldn't be able to see them on the same panel that you would see Mirko beating something up. But yeah, you look at it right there. And now you look at Mirko and it's like, let's use Mineta's words. And the heroes too, did they make the right choices? Well, did Mirko make the right choice when she sacrificed her body? Because remember, the Nomu were still going after her. Let the Nomus hurt her so that she could get closer to Shigaraki. Did Mirko make the wrong choice when she got Shigaraki out at 75%? I don't think so. Not at this point. And again, that's assuming that you agree that attacking the villains early was a good idea in the long run. But yeah, if you assume attacking them preemptively was a good, then Mirko's choice here, which is a natural consequence of that first choice, is a good move, because it's thanks to that particular thing that we now have an opportunity where Shigaraki is faltering, and then we can play the game even more. You go and you look at Xless. Xless made a choice. He destroyed the thing that had the bullets. He didn't know what it was, but he destroyed it. What did that lead to? A situation where Shigaraki has less bullets. That seems like a victory to me. We don't want the quirk bullets getting out there. So that's also another like pro to the heroes going and preempting. Another hero who made a sacrifice, Crust. When Crust made the choice to save Aizawa, was that a good choice? Well, yes, it was a good choice because we saw the immediate benefit. We saw that if we're going to be dealing with Shigaraki, good thing to have Aizawa there to have Shigaraki just burn himself out and get closer to the point where he's going to start breaking. So it's actually very interesting when you compare the two halves here. On Mineta's side, there is that sense of like, did we screw up? Because you don't see the immediate benefits of what they were doing. But you go over to Shigaraki's side, and everyone's little sacrifices make a huge difference. Again, it's super unfortunate that we're in a situation where Higanto is going to be taking down over 20 cities. All I can really say is that it probably would have been worse. Nothing would have stopped Shigaraki from destroying everything at the regular time frame. Shigaraki coming out at 100% doesn't suddenly make him more mentally stable. It was always going to be a problem. It's just, this is just how things shake out. And again, like the worst choice really was letting Higanto go unchecked. I mean, in my mind, if you have a situation where you're saying you don't know how to deal with a particular villain, you shouldn't be saying like, oh, don't worry about it, he's not going to move anyway. You shouldn't be making that assumption. You should be trying to move around your resources to at least confirm that you're going to be able to get rid of this guy. Because it's just funny. Gran Torino had all the intel on Gigantomachia. The Hero Commission knew about what Gigantomachia was capable of. But that before we move on to the next point here, I do want to say is you just have to remember what Majestic had said. He said your decision to actions were correct. You kids played this right. Whatever happens now, don't ever doubt that. Again, funny that Mineta doubts that immediately after, but I think this is also just a pro's mentality. He's looking at the situation. He's like, this is just that hard of a situation. Like, we were quite literally up against hell here. So I think Majestic, as an adult, is able to say, like, this was a botched situation. You guys, you did the best you could. Those were the right actions. If this was a normal enemy, it wouldn't have been a problem. I think that's the big thing that comes out of all of this. But it was still very interesting, and it is really interesting to look at the comparison between the two situations. It's really interesting where you can see a situation where you can see the effects of many people doing small things compared to a situation where it's like, what were you even there for, right? Now, looking at Higanto's incredibly terrifying visage, which honestly, incredibly terrifying. I love the claws. I love everything about this in terms of just what he looks like. You know, where do we go from here? What's going to happen? This is pretty scary. This is really scary. There's people coming after Higanto. They're running like the Liberation Paranormal Fund, blah blah. They're coming after him. Shigaraki's on the other side. Like, Midnight, what is going on with Midnight? Is she okay? You know, what's going to happen next? And you know, I'm thinking about it, and things are weird here, man. You know, we have promises. We know that Izuku needs to still get some more quirks unlocked. We know that we are supposed to see Izuku's father eventually. God forbid it is All for One. We know we need a follow-up on Stain and Tartarus. We know that Shoji still needs his time in the spotlight. We know that Shinzo somehow has to come back in here, and I think there's a really good opportunity for Shinzo to come back in here with Aizawa's injuries. We know that Mirio was like, what was his name? Night Eye saw Mirio's future, and he saw Mirio being a great hero. So we need an opportunity like that, because him being a little bit creepy with Eri is not really a heroic future, I think. And the question is, how do we get all those situations? How do we get all those plot points answered? And you know, I'm looking at this, and it's tough. Like, the two variations I got in my mind, it's like either we go into just prolonged suffering, like after this, the villains just go on a nice streak and they're just destroying stuff. Like Higanto keeps on moving north or something. Like he just keeps moving, I don't know, south. He goes somewhere, and he keeps breaking stuff. That sure. But at this point, like, to me, it feels like we need to reset the boards. Like, we need to like have a moment where everyone can just back off and then just regroup. Like, when you look at Shigaraki's injuries, Shigaraki needs to regroup. I don't think he's going to be able to last much longer, especially if Izuku gets his hands on him. Like, I feel like Shigaraki should probably retreat for a little while. But the thing is, like, how do we reset the board? There's with this page, you see that there's a lot of the Liberation Paranormal, blah, blah, blah. They're out in the streets now. Like, how do you reset the board when there's so many villains out and about right now and so many heroes are taken down? You know, I was thinking, like, if we want to, like, reset the board, if we need some Deus Ex Machinas, the only people that can really come in and save this situation, it ain't the top 10 heroes because they got wiped out, right? It has to be the international community. The only way that this is going to work in terms of like a nice solution that just resets the board easily, is just if the international community of heroes comes in. Like maybe the hero commission was smart enough to be like, yo, we might need extra help, man. We might need like Captain Celebrity to show up. Maybe they have a Suicide Squad. Hey, we're gonna need some villains to show up and like deal with this. Or maybe the government has some secret, or I don't know. They need something of that magnitude to come in here. I mean, like, if All Might was able to go to America and escape All for One that easily, then America must have something up their sleeve. So, you know, as I see Giganto running in here, I'm really wondering, well, are we gonna need to bring in the international community to help out? But like, I don't know. Hero Academia, the main series, doesn't seem very keen on world building in that particular direction. So it gets kind of hard. If we're talking about other situations to reset the board, you know, we're talking about situations where Shigaraki makes his stand with his villains and then they all retreat, and all the villains or all the heroes are so weakened that they let the villains retreat. Shigaraki has Skeptic, which could only mean that he probably wants to use Skeptic to send a message out to the rest of the world. That makes sense to me. What other options are there? It's just the heroes can't be in a prolonged fight. They're gonna have to withdraw at some point. Villains with Shigaraki injured the way he is probably need to withdraw at some point. It's a tough situation. One more thing I wanted to say with the Liberation Front. The average, okay, there's 80 kilometers between where they started at the mansion and where Shigaraki is. The average human sprint speed is 24 kilometers. That's going to take them more than 2 hours to get there. I legitimately doubt that the Liberation Army can sprint for more than 2 hours. I legitimately doubt that. So that's another component. It's the timing. Giganto, I don't care. He could probably get there however quickly the author needs. Giganto can probably do it. But everyone else is like, I legitimately don't know. But that means if we are like putting just regular human limits here, the rest of the Paranormal Liberation Front, they're going to take a while, which means there's going to be a ton of stragglers. You know, how do we clean up the stragglers? This is a pretty nasty situation. Yeah, no, man. I don't think we're going into everything being terrible. I think we're going into a situation. Well, this is just like it seems like it'd be easier to reset the board. And when I say reset the board, I mean like everyone retreats. It just feels like it'd be easier to reset the board because right now the Liberation Front's also lost their base, their headquarters. So it's a pretty nasty situation. But if we are resetting the board, the big question is just what's the mechanism behind the reset? Anyway, pretty exciting stuff with Hero Academia. Let's very quickly go into the page-by-page walkthrough. We already covered quite a bit. So page 1, I love seeing all the kids here. Sero with his helmet off is really the one that got me because that really made me feel like, whoa. So they just saw stuff. And little notes here is that Kirishima is back. He's in the back here behind Vanta. And Kaminari, you can barely see him, but he is actually still being held by Emily. I'm going to do the little screen here so you guys can see it. He's right behind Sero's leg. On page 2, we have Sero asking for the hero's condition, and worth noting the directions here. Over on this part, you can kind of see the city, and when you look back at the other side of the page, you can see that it looks like the damage funnels outward. So that just kind of implies that Giganto didn't really attack areas behind him. Just keep that in mind. On page 3, this one is actually really interesting. It seems that this is a med camp, and these guys that Tokoyami is holding, they seem to be doctors given the face mask. What's interesting here is that it reminds us that falling debris was a danger, so if someone got hit by random debris, they might be dead. On this page, we also see something that, in my opinion, seems like hyperbole. Momo says that they survived because the kids weren't considered worthy enemies. My question is, like, on what ground do you say that, Momo? Like, and now, mind you, again, Momo just saw stuff, so her having exaggerations going wild right now are totally justified. But let's just talk about it. On page 4 and 5, what we witness is the kids being saved by Majestic. Now, I think the kids are in shock, again, of course, and they don't know what's going through, and they also don't know what's going through Makia's mind. But the thing is, Momo is objectively wrong. We as readers know that Makia is heading towards Shigaraki at full speed, and we know he decided he's not just going to ignore the people that get in his way. So if you're in his way, Makia is going to swat you. That's why he's putting in so much effort right now. Makia has given no indication that he's going to go out of his way to destroy someone. And I think a good example here is that it doesn't seem like he targeted the people that were at the mansion, even though logically there's some tough people there like Edgeshot that he should be targeting. So what I'm saying is, so honestly, Momo's in shock, which justifies the statement, but I don't think it's correct. Like, honestly, I'm not even sure if the villains noticed that the kids got sent away. And another thing that's worth noting is that had Majestic not moved them away, they would have been smushed. So again, like the idea that they were ignored because they're not worthy of being enemies. No. You were ignored because you were moved out of the way. That's all it was, in my opinion. And on page 4 and 5, so page 4 and 5, we see utter mayhem. Here's some more little details. Here we see Seiro pulling out, I think, Kodai. Is her name? And we see Vanta covering for Shimage, and I think Vanta has a little thing for Shimage. We also see Gang Orca's body here, and we've already seen it before. When we look at the flyaway panels, we can see that Kaminari was actually alone, which is interesting because it means on page 1, Emily went out of her way to rest Kaminari on her laps. Okay, jokes aside, I did find that a little bit interesting. And at this point, you know, talking about the deaths, I think a good chunk of heroes probably survived this. I mean, it looks like Makia is just causing property damage. So I think as long as a hero didn't get smushed by rocks and only just got tossed around, I think they're going to be fine. Like Gang Orca, like he's above ground, so he might be alright. Maybe. I really don't know. It's really hard. Like, you know, collateral damage, property damage is one of the common things you're going to see in Shonen. It's also one of the hardest things to actually quantify in terms of damage. Yeah, on page 8 and 9, we have the doctor giving us some cool little morsels. Now, he also says that Higanta Makia lives and dies for Shigaraki. Maybe that will be a clue towards how Makia can be stopped. Maybe he tries to do something for Shigaraki that exposes. Hard to tell. I really wonder how they're going to get Shigaraki out of the situation, too. Like, it'd be pretty funny if Makia just grabs everyone and just tosses them. That'd be funny. Anyway, yeah. Moving on. Other details on page 8 include Kisagiri Man and Native fighting Nomu. And let's just remember, Native, the man getting his arm chomped by a Nomu, is the guy that Stain thought wasn't good enough and was never going to change because Stain believes that no people don't change. I think Native is very brave and he didn't run away from the fight. And I think I'm happy to see him here doing his best. We also had Burning doing her best too. On page 9, we see the doc hyping up Shigaraki and we see Aizawa down for the count. On page 10, so this page like has me a little confused, not gonna lie, so I would love your guys' input. So first, what does Shoto mean by helping Ryukyu? If you go back to chapter 282, the gap between Ryukyu getting blown away and Shoto intervening is legitimately 1 page. How do you manage to help her, Shoto, in that small amount of time? Is my question. Now, the fan translation for that situation makes a little bit more sense because the French translation says that Shoto was busy, or Shoto was late because he was helping Ryukyu's team. And that makes more sense. Ryukyu's team is Ochako and Suyu. He could have been. Or he could have been helping Mirko and Ryukyu's sidekick. That makes more sense than I had to help Ryukyu and them first. But that might just be like a little translation thing. Another point of confusion, it was just Bakugo for me. Bakugo is really close to Gran Torino still. So just we're on the same page, let me just run this by you real quick. This is a flashback panel. This is when Izuku had gone after Shigaraki the first time. And you can tell from the discoloration. That's flashback discoloration. Also worth noting, in that panel, Izuku still has his arm. So that is a flashback panel. Bakugo's thinking back to it and being frustrated. My question is, what about this panel from 282? Because in this panel, it looks like Bakugo had launched himself forward when he tried to destroy the bullet. So my question is, did Bakugo launch himself forward to destroy the bullet and then came back to the same position he was in previously? Now, it's also worth noting that it's really hard to tell relative distances in manga. This might just not be worth nitpicking. It might just be like just some kind of weird distance drawing or whatever. Page 11, we have Shigaraki saying "Welp." I assume that's just loose translation. And we also had Rocklock telling Izuku to run, and I think this is actually consistent with Rocklock's character. We already know that he has hangups about young people getting involved in dangerous scenarios, and he is a new father. So him defaulting back to that kind of perspective makes sense to me. If you were to ask me to justify why he would have that reaction with Izuku, it's probably because he doesn't want Izuku getting hurt. Page 12 has that moment that we were waiting for. The effects of 75 completion finally. The important thing here is that Shigaraki says his body got banged up because of his surpassing his limits. So good to know. Also, loved Shigaraki's confusion with the date. I love that little look of vulnerability. I love seeing that he's not so infallible. And then on page 13 is where things get, again, a little bit tricky. Izuku's lines make it seem like Shigaraki's body is falling apart due to All For One. Whereas it's pretty clear to me that the body is falling apart because of the physical augmentations the doctor gave him. Like the augmentations aren't stable, and because Shigaraki pushed the body to its limits, like that instability got revealed. Now, regeneration faltering long enough for Shigaraki to just be torn apart, that does, I think, stem from All For One itself being a little bit unstable, and that's also very interesting. But yeah, when Izuku draws commonality with Shigaraki, I think it's a good scene. Like, actually, I love the comparison, but I don't read it as a perfect comparison. The power that Shigaraki's body can't keep up with isn't All For One. It's the Nomu level body. And the proof of that statement is that when All For One is cancelled, Shigaraki's being ripped apart just by exerting himself, by pushing his limits. So in my opinion, powerful comparison makes sense why Izuku would make it, but I don't think it's the most perfect comparison. Although I might be misreading, or I might have missed something, but it's just like the way that the sentences flow into each other. It just seems to paint a different direction. What this does tell us, though, is that 75% Shigaraki is going to be in a state where hyper regeneration is going to be the only thing keeping him going, or keeping him alive in a fight when he's been in the fight for too long of a time. Page 14, the most important detail here you can see is that Izuku still has his arms, and it looks like his right arm is where he's concentrating Black Whip emanations on. You do get a shot of this later on, but it's nice to see it here. Also, worth pointing out, I think this is the first time that Ryukyu's sidekick has ever spoken. I'm not sure, don't quote me on that, but I think this is the first time she's ever spoken. And it's nice that Mirko's still alive and she's trying to keep her alive. So I hope that she stays alive. Now we're going to skip over to page 16 and 17. So these are the cool pages. Gran Torino still hanging on. Absolutely great to see that. Izuku, we have him floating. He takes several people with him. Now, let me go through this with you because it took me a while. I had to be staring at this for a while to understand what was going on. So this guy's Bakugo. This is Gran Torino, and this is Ryukyu, I think, given the costume. Worth noting, her hand is destroyed. It looks like it's been mangled, so that makes sense. And this person, this is Shigaraki. So Izuku launched Shigaraki into the sky along with everyone else. And now the next thing to check out here is that Izuku cancels Black Whip on Shigaraki, which you can tell because of the tendril here being disconnected, and because you could tell the tendril was ahead of Izuku. So it seems like Izuku is planning on punching Shigaraki hard enough to maybe send him back to the ground. Like, he's gonna punch Shigaraki. It's gonna be very interesting to see if Izuku can actually handle fighting Shigaraki, because like we saw how hardcore Endeavor had to be in his choreography, and I'm not sure if Izuku is capable of that level of choreography too, but I'm very excited to see that be a case. I mean, it's been 3 months, right? Now, another thing I do want to say here is that Izuku seemed to go very confidently into this with float. So now I'm wondering if before this he managed to activate float well enough to know that he could activate it, but not well enough to know that he could use float properly. Because I think having a situation where he got some of it working beforehand and only in this fight got it to work fully enough that it'd be reliable would be a nice compromise instead of just unlocking it for the first time. That said, though, that's just my personal preference. If the author wants to say that Izuku got it right now and understood how to use it perfectly enough on the first try that he could use it in battle without any trouble, then sure, author, you do that. I mean, like, I think the rest of your power system says otherwise. But yeah, that'd be cool. Although on that point, it is important to note that it seems like they got sent up pretty far up into the sky. So it seems like you could say, well, that might be the sign that Izuku doesn't have full control of float here yet. Or that might be the sign that Izuku was able to just, like, Izuku might have wanted to go that high. Like, it's really hard to tell right now. I really hope next week we go in and we get a little bit of flashback. Oh, speaking of a flashback, we had the stereotypical setup. We had a very quick flashback to what Higanto had ultimately done. Anyway, another observation for this chapter in general, Rocklock had more scenes than I expected, and I'm a little bit concerned. I wonder if the author is getting ready to kill Rocklock. I hope not. And yeah, man, ultimately very excited for Izuku. How much time is left on the video? Okay, we got 33 minutes, so I think I can speak for a little bit more because we've done 40 minutes before. Yeah, man, I'm very excited. As I see the group that goes up into the air with Izuku, you have Endeavor, you have Shoto, you have Bakugo, right? Those three guys have long distance attacks. It'd be nice if Izuku can time it kind of, or like give him some support. They're all held up by Izuku right now, so they could fire at Shigaraki and maybe like keep Shigaraki under control, because Shigaraki still has all his other quirks, unless Aizawa wakes up right now and like just cancels Shigaraki out again, which again would be awesome if he did. But yeah, I think we're in a good position here. Now, we still have Higanto, but like again, the big issue now with Higanto is we don't know how quickly Higanto is moving. And I'm not gonna lie, if Higanto clears 80 kilometers in 20 minutes, well, Higanto moving at 80 kilometers an hour honestly doesn't seem that aggressive. But that would be, if he cleared it in 20 minutes, there's 320s in an hour. That's 240. I think 240 kilometers an hour. He's moving at 240 kilometers an hour if he gets there in 20 minutes. That's pretty aggressive. That's really aggressive. So I'm really hoping for the international community, like Captain Celebrity, please come and save these guys. Are there any other points worth making? Well, you know, Shigaraki's doing his best. I'm wondering if also Shigaraki could be a martyr. Maybe that'd be another way Shigaraki dies in all this, and then Dabi steps up and takes his rightful place as the villain of Hero Academia. But I don't think that's gonna happen. No, man, it's a pretty exciting chapter. I do think that we need to reset, though. I think everyone needs to back up, because I think this battle's gone far too long. But it's just like, I don't see. It's hard, right? This could go so many ways still, but I'm veering towards a reset where everyone goes back and takes time to reflect on what just happened here. Now, we saw the doctor getting caught as well at the end of the chapter, or like earlier in the chapter. He was being taken in by police. If the doctor ends up in jail, I could totally see a prison break to get the doctor out so that he can finish Shigaraki's tune-up. Because as Shigaraki, I would want to get that tune-up if I'm not gonna be able to beat everyone here right now. Oh, and in regards to Mineta's there. He's wondering if they made the right choices. Majestic is saying like, you guys did the best you could in that situation, and I'm just thinking like, if Higanto falls asleep at the worst possible moment, that will be the moment where they made a good choice. Although again, me being if I was all for one, I would give Higanto some kind of quirk that would prevent poisons, or I would modify his body to prevent poisons or something like that. But yeah, that was Hero Academia chapter 283. Everyone, let me know what you thought down below. Let me know if I missed anything, and thank you so much for watching. So I'm gonna end it there. Till next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.